Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here in this very precarious, collapsed place. So you might know exactly where we are. We're here in the Divide, in particular we are in the Cave of the Abaddon, to talk about the final kind of creature that's... This one kind of bridges a gap between the humanoid creatures and the animal-like creatures. We're talking about the tunnelers today, so you might see some little red spots on my compass, and there's also these little kind of the like ant mounds, but way bigger. Some of them with stuff coming out of them. So the tunnelers are it's unclear exactly where they came from. Ulysses, if you talk to Ulysses about them, he does kind of mention that he believes that they were human, but they were severely mutated after the bombs fell and stayed underground, and you know became these creatures in the Divide here. In this location, we're kind of on the border between the state of Nevada and the state of California, and it's where a lot of the sort of nuclear missile silos were located in this place before the bombs. So these tunnelers, they're kind of reptilian and kind of humanoid, but very different, and I think they're very interesting. So they're kind of in between the animal-like and the humanoid. They kind of fit right in the middle of that, and you can see them pottering about up here. So, you know, they do tend to move around on all fours. They have kind of bioluminescence on them, so you can see, let's put the light on them so you can see. So they do have, you know, hands and feet, and their anatomy of their limbs and things is very much like a human. No tails or anything present, but they've got these like scales on their skin, they've got these claws, really sharp teeth, ears almost look like elf ears, and then these kind of horns that protrude on their shoulders and on their heads, with bioluminescent tips and bioluminescent eyes. So they are well designed for living underground. They burrow, and they are very sensitive to light. So one of the things that you can do is that you can sort of frenzy them with a flashbang. You can scare them away with fire, and they don't like the light. That's why they tend to stay underground and only come up to the surface to attack and things. Some of them are venomous. I don't know if we've got any here. Let's find out. So your basic tunneler, standard tunneler. Here we go. Venomous tunnelers. So the venomous tunnelers are a wee bit smaller actually than the other ones, but they do have a venomous bite, which can be quite serious. They're fast moving. They burrow. So these kind of mounds here are burrows that they can pop in and out of. There's loads of them down here, so they can go, you know, burrow in, and then they can come out at another one. And as you can see, they do tend to hang around in groups, and they attack in groups as well. So they tend to swarm opponents and tear them apart, which is nice. And they do avoid light, and they kind of live underground, so it's something that most reptiles need sunlight exposure in order to make vitamin D. However, there are certain nocturnal lizards and snakes that actually don't have an absolute requirement for that, because they can produce their own vitamin D, or they can acquire it from their diet, especially snakes, because they hold prey. These guys, that's probably the same as any kind of essential nutrients they'll get, because they're of what they're eating, and the way they attack you and the way they attack deathclaws and things, they're almost certainly carnivores, and that is kind of how they hunt. There is a queen. She probably is gone, because I think these guys are a respawn, because in this save file, Lonesome Road's already been, you know, fully completed. There's a hulking tunneler, a venomous tunneler. Yeah, so the hulking tunnelers are the toughest ones, and one thing you can kind of see is that they don't really take bonus damage from headshots as well. But there is a queen that you find in this location when you're going through Lonesome Road, and she is the most dangerous. She is basically on par with the Deathclaw, so she's just slightly less health than a Deathclaw, but has really powerful offensive attacks, and she'll definitely mess up your day. So something to be aware of, but I don't think she's here. But yeah, it's a safe bet that they are carnivorous, and that they basically mutated and stayed underground. There is a potential theory that FEV is involved in their mutation as well. Seems likely FEV is a big problem everywhere you look in the Fallout universe, so that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And then what happened, so part of the story of Lonesome Road is that you, as a courier, you brought something from Navarro, which is you might know is where the Enclave were based, and you brought a package here from Navarro that set off and detonated a bunch of the buried nuclear warheads in this area, which caused underground earthquakes and collapse and things. So that's why this is all, I mean, you can see there's kind of, at one point this was a hospital above the ground. It's all these buildings that have collapsed. And here, and I think there's even, if I remember rightly, there's a swimming pool on the ceiling. Yeah. So up there, there's a literal swimming pool because everything's just collapsed. And that's kind of what brought these tunnelers to the surface to a degree, because their entire kind of underground world caved in because of all these explosions and things. But again, talking to Ulysses has a lot to say about them on your second visit to this area, which you apparently don't remember your first visit for some reason. That's kind of the whole thing, that your character has amnesia, but at least the game is kind enough to give you an autodoc right at the end of this place, which you probably will need with dealing with all the tunnelers. They are definitely challenging. But Ulysses thinks that these creatures, the tunnelers, are going to become a bigger problem for the Mojave eventually, because they're continually burrowing and expanding their tunnel network. And there's only so far west they're going to be able to go before they're going to hit the ocean under California. So there's a chance that they're going to head east, and they're going to head into the Mojave and head into the area around New Vegas and take it over. And this is what Ulysses thinks, that they are going to be a threat that the Mojave is going to have to worry about at some point in the sort of near future. They are classed as abominations as far as the game is concerned, and that means that you can frenzy them with flashbangs. You can make them flee with a flamer, or with the you get a flare gun as well. So I went back a little bit to see if I could find anything suitable, to see if we can get frenzy on these guys. I'm curious if it'll work. I've obviously got combat AI turned off as always for this, so it may or may not work, but let's see. Okay, it does put them into a frenzy, but doesn't actually do anything. Oh, he got knocked over. Right, okay. Bear with me. Yeah, so you can frenzy them with the flashbangs, which means that sometimes they'll attack each other. Like that. Which can be a very effective way of taking them down. And you still get credit for it as well, which is nice. Okay, he's going to come for me now because all his friends are dead. Yeah, so he's running Yeah, so that's something when they feel threatened and they feel like they're not going to actually win the fight, then they will take off and go into one of their tunnels and then come back to get you later, which is what he's just done there. Oh, missed an arm. But yeah, you can see they've lost toes as well, so like the feet, you know, they've only got 4 fingers and 4 toes in each hand. So, you know, obviously radiation has massively changed them to the point where, you know, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that they're not actually, you know, human, but it's really quite fascinating and creepy. And we know that, you know, there's a lot of different things that can happen to humans in terms of mutations, because you've got your ghouls, you've got your super mutants, you've got the nightkin, you've got, you know, there's the marked men that are here as well. You've got the trogs and the pit. There's just so many different things. I mean, Harold, who ended up basically turning into a tree. So it's not kind of outside the realm of possibility. And then if these guys have been living and breeding underground for a couple of 100 years, and they're just expanding their tunnels, expanding their territory, eventually they are going to become a problem for more populated areas. So it kind of makes sense, and you know that Ulysses kind of warns us of that. So he's spent a lot of time here, so he's had a chance to potentially learn quite a lot about the tunnelers and how they operate and what they do. So it's an interesting thing that's a warning that he gives, and apparently they do breed very fast as well. And when you first come down into the underground and the divide the first time, and you see a deathclaw walking past, and then you can hear sounds of it being ripped apart, and that's a little kind of set piece that the game does to show you, to introduce you to the tunnelers and say, look, these guys are nothing to be sniffed at, because look how quickly they can take down a deathclaw. Because up to that point, definitely deathclaws are going to be the most kind of dangerous opponent and the kind of apex predator of the wasteland. It's well known that the deathclaws are generally the most dangerous things. So the game wants to say, look, these tunnelers are dangerous too, because look how quickly they can destroy a deathclaw. So that you know to be careful and to be wary of them. So yeah, definitely very, very interesting, and I think it does highlight that when it comes to whether you're talking about mutation or evolution, evolution being a more natural kind of progression of things, whereas mutation suggests that there's some kind of artificial intervention into it, that it's not just about changing the genetic code, it's not just about, you know, what happens to damage the DNA of the thing that's mutating or evolving, but the environment plays a role in that as well. You know, these guys were basically presumably buried underground. Maybe it was a kind of cheap underground shelter that didn't withstand the radiation, but they were trapped underground, so they've adapted to be in the dark, they've adapted to hunt as ambush predators, they've adapted to live in this kind of environment, and that's why something like flashbang or fire stresses them out and frenzies them, because their senses have adapted to functioning in a dark environment like this. And then probably the kind of explosions that happened at the divide when you brought the package from Navarro might have set something off and brought them to the surface to a degree as well. So yep, it's an interesting one, and again adding new threats, so because you're in a slightly different location from the base game, so there's different things, there's different threats because something different happened in each environment, and it shows you that, you know, the environment has as much of a role to play in a lot of these mutations and a lot of these changes to the living things in the world. It's not just the radiation, it's not just FEV, but the environment does play a part in that as well, and I think that's really, really interesting. So now that we've done the tunnelers, that's pretty much all the kind of animals left to do except for the birds, which I had intended to do this week, but things kind of got away from me. So next week we will be talking about the birds, and then after that we're going to get straight into all the kind of humanoid ones, which we'll look at the ghouls, the super mutants, some of the variants there, and we'll see how they evolved. So there's no kind of real life creature to compare the tunnelers to, because they came from people with some reptilian features potentially that probably came about similarly to what happened with the death claws and things. So hopefully you found this very interesting. I do love Lonesome Road. I have to say it's definitely one of my favourite DLCs, and I think Ulysses himself is a really, really interesting character. That his beliefs and his kind of philosophy on things, I think he's very, very interesting. So let me know what you think, and next week we'll talk about birds. Then after that we're going to get into all the kind of humanoid living things in the wasteland and how they came about and what's so interesting about them. So lots and lots to talk about then. So hopefully you'll join me for that, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.